The amount of people that engage with games and spend money in games and their identities in games, I think this is a really critical thing. It's about your digital identity, right? And so many games now are more than just come and play as this character and get through. It's about connecting. They're social. It's really about finding a part of yourself that you didn't realize you had in your physical world. People build real-time social communities in games and they want to express themselves. And that's going to just become more and more predominant, and you need to dress those people. They all need fashion. They want to go beyond that, and if anything,
they want to have options.
Exactly, right? They want to have options. And I think especially now, like, it's all about being able to express yourself. So how you express yourself digitally is going to be huge, and I think that's where digital fashion is the missing piece with that.
Welcome to Up Next in Tech, a podcast exploring the intersection of emerging tech, responsible innovation, and the way we live, play, and interact through conversations with the brilliant people that are in the trenches, building these nascent industries, and really grappling with the endless possibilities and uncertainties that come with them. I'm your host, Ariba Jahan, and in this episode, I chat with Nirmala Shome, who is the head of marketing and growth at the Fabricant, a digital fashion house that's really focused on building a new fashion industry where everybody can participate and profit. With over 15 years of experience across digital agencies, e-commerce, and immersive startups, Nirmala has really honed her expertise in being a digital producer, a community builder, and a storytelling marketer for cutting-edge technology. In this conversation, Nirmala shares her origin journey, how she started with studying digital arts in Australia to taking a big leap of faith and moving to New York to dive into the digital agency scene here, and then eventually landing at the Fabricant's Amsterdam headquarters. We discussed the role of digital fashion in gaming, augmented reality, and AI. We also talk about how do you balance a brand vision with community ownership if you truly want co-design and co-creation for the future, the use of provocative imagery to push diversity and inclusion. Nirmala also digs into the future of fashion labels and IPs, the difference in work cultures worldwide that she's had a chance to experience, the reality of explaining what she does and nascent industries while things are still being built and figured out, and her outlook on both the potential opportunities and risks of our increasingly virtual world. I will say I started this episode with a lot of curiosity for what is digital fashion and what is its role in sustainability, in tech, in the way that we express ourselves and culture and all of that. Nirmala broke all that down for me. So I really appreciate her for this, and I hope you get to learn a lot from her. So let's dive in. Hey, Nirmala, I'm so excited that we're finally doing this. Ever since we were on that panel together with Michelle and Jake about the Metaverse, I was like, we have to get Nirmala on the podcast and to just talk about all things Metaverse, digital fashion, and like all the things you're interested in. So thank you so much for making the time today.
No, thank you. And same, I'm also excited. I agree. I think like we're meant to chat. So it's great that it's happening.
I think a great place to start could be sharing your origin story. You've had such an interestingly rich career, dabbled in so many different roles and industries. I think we'd just love to hear that.
Yeah, definitely. So I think my origin story, I guess I'll go back to when I first graduated, which was a long time ago now. But when I first graduated, I was in Australia. I just finished a media communication arts degree. And I was just trying to figure out, I was interested in marketing, interested always in digital. I'd just done a thesis in digital arts. I was really interested in the creative potential of digital technology.
And that's at a time where digital technology or like what you were looking into was new, right? Not a lot of people were doing that.
Yeah, it was definitely early days. I remember for one of my projects, I had to go into Second Life and interview people. I went to the American apparel store on Second Life. And I remember it being such a like crazy experience and yeah, so new. Like it was still really early days for all that type of thing. I was so fascinated by it, especially like the potential of interactive technology, interactive art. But obviously that was such a small space back then that I ended up my first job, which I managed to get through just cold emailing with ridiculous subject lines. I have what it takes and things like that to get my first interview at Clevenger BBDO, which was actually one of Australia's top advertising agencies, and somehow got passed along a chain to their digital media team. And my first job was actually a digital analyst doing reporting for like direct marketing campaigns. So like banner ads, email campaigns, Google and media. And yeah, started off just doing massive Excel spreadsheets, reports on conversion, on click-through rates, all that stuff. So that was like how I found my way into it. And then got deeper into that world, but more into media buying. So actually working with media companies, and then got into account management. And then at that time, I felt like I was moving further away from what I loved, which was actually like working on the digital, the creation of the digital content itself.
You were analyzing it, not necessarily
exactly. I was analyzing it or buying media for it, but not involved in the creative part. And what I was really interested in was the creation of it and how it was created. So I actually then moved into project management or being a producer. And that was, I think, where I really fell in love with being actually able to, like, how do you produce work? And at that time, obviously it was like banner ads or Facebook social apps or email. So it wasn't anything too crazy, but I still really enjoyed that. Just having being hands-on with the team and actually building something. And I think that was always something that I loved to do. I then was able to, during my time, actually work on things like apps and websites and e-commerce sites. And so I did get more experience, and then eventually got the itch to leave Australia and go overseas. Managed to get a job through the help of some friends in New York at a digital agency, which was like a big leap for me, a leap of faith. Quit my job, went over there and ended up staying in New York for 5 years. And I think when I was in New York, I started off at a digital agency, really working on delivering like massive e-com platforms, loyalty programs, CMSs, all that's like super technical stuff, applications. So I had a lot of experience doing these big kind of builds. But again, I had that feeling of it was quite mechanical, losing a bit of that creativity. We were really rolling out these large scale platforms. So I moved to a very like boutique product design studio, who are actually have now been bought by Instrument, which is another big product agency in the US. And that was, I think, one of the best jobs I had, where I was working still in project management. But what this also did was they would do really high, like conceptual, like product design for product innovation teams at Google, at Spotify, at Nike, at Apple, Xbox. Like we got to work on the Xbox interface design, prototype it, did some amazing stuff with the Google Creative Lab team. And that was really where I got exposed to like all this really new emerging tech, like stuff where the teams there were prototyping. They had this technology, but they didn't know how to bring it to a consumer level or how to present it to consumers. So a lot of it was like machine learning tools, trying to put them into like playful interfaces or playful experiences that people could actually interact with and get something out of, just to really test the waters. So really
then you had the analyst background too, and then you were able to connect those dots of like, how do you take something so new and technical and then reach the masses, or like how do you scale that and market that and communicate that?
Well, I think, like at this point, a lot of what we did actually never saw the light of day. A lot of it was really like early stage. There were definitely a few things that did get out. Like we worked on some Google AI music projects that actually made it into the live environment. But at this stage, it was really like about just like trying to create engagement. So yeah, definitely connecting it to engagement. And product design it really is, I think, like the best product design is often quite playful and actually crosses into entertainment. Yes, it has to be functional, but what actually really gets you and what I think humans really respond to is that sense of play and engagement. And so it was interesting because we really pushed that boundary of not just doing something, okay, we have a goal, we need to get people to use something, but how do we bring that high quality like level of play and engagement to go a bit above and beyond. But so that was a really interesting experience. And then after my time in New York, I was like, okay, time to move on to the next thing. Moved back to Australia for a couple of years, was freelancing, doing various random things in that time. But then got that itch again to move overseas, and this time to Europe, which I'd been to a few times on vacation and was really fascinated too by like, what would it be like to work and live in Europe? Like obviously very different to Australia and America. So managed again through a friend to get a job with the Fabricant, where I am now, a digital fashion house, which at the time when I first came across them, I was like, I really don't understand this world at all. But I was like, look, I want to move. They're looking for a producer. Let me see what I can do. I had a great first conversation with one of the founders, Kerry, and yeah, it was just like a little bit hooked with this. Again, it was like the super new emerging tech. They have a really compelling vision where they knew that digital fashion was coming. They knew that the world would, like, it wasn't there yet, but it was coming. The world would have to embrace it with the way things are going in the fashion industry. They were just like super early. And so they hooked me with that. And I was working with them and we did some incredible projects. They were working with some amazing clients at the time. I actually was lucky enough to work on a project for Off-White with Virgil Abloh directly, which is really amazing. And some other incredible clients that they had during the pandemic, because it was like really the time when brands were like, okay, we need to find digital solutions because our physical production was at a standstill. So that was like a really incredible time to be working at the Fabricant, moved over and yeah, have been here since 2020. Had my first child here as well. So that was also a fun experience, challenging but fun.
And pandemic baby too, right?
Yeah, pandemic baby, exactly. My journey at the Fabricant started actually before the Fabricant officially launched their platform, which was like the Web3 enabled digital fashion co-creation and minting platform with a marketplace, wearability. And I helped them at first kind of launch that platform. So I was working more on the product side. And then as we were growing the product out after we'd done a couple of launches, I was really fascinated with the growing kind of discipline around Web3 communities and how they were so powerful at that early stage. Everyone was talking about like, how do you harness this power? How do you like work with communities? You're really building a product that's so deeply connected to them. And so I really, again, was like, okay, how do I get deeper into this community world? Because the way I saw it was like focusing on the product. It was still really interesting to me and I still love working on product and product design, but you're really focused on delivering features and values to service this product, right? Your success is really about the product success. And I really wanted to broaden my focus to think about the community success, because a growing community, essentially, there could be many products and services that come from a growing community that could be supported by a growing community, as we see with many other projects. It starts with one product, but then they have to spin up new ones, or as the community changes, as it grows, there are different needs. So I was like, how do I go beyond just product and think about building for community at a larger scale? So doing activations and events and also learning and feedback loops and all that interesting stuff. Yeah, I was head of community, helped build the community team, helped build up our Discord, do events, have run many events, IRL, as well as online events. And yeah, have been working in community, really love that. And most recently are kind of transitioning to this marketing and growth role, which kind of encompasses community within it, but then also has a focus on, marketing and acquisition.
And that's like the Fabricant brand marketing, right?
Exactly. So it's really about the storytelling from the Fabricant, from our partners, from our collaborators, how we do that across all the different platforms. What's our strategy when we go to market? How do we promote things? How do we acquire new people? How do we bring them to the right places? And then on the community side, it's really, okay, how do we keep them? How do we retain them? How do we make sure that we're creating a space they want to return to? Because definitely, especially in the Web3 space, the community is such a powerful thing to have. I think the Azuki drop was a recent telling example of that, where they were able to sell out their collection primarily through their existing holder base. And I think that's, as much as many people, obviously there's criticism about the drop and the art and things like that, but the fact that they were able to do that in this current market at still a fairly decent high ETH price is pretty amazing, that their community came back and supported them through that. So you really see like the power of community come through in Web3, I think, more than the way you see it come through for celebrities and fandom. I think that's the comparable thing.
I'd love to go back to the beginning. A thread I keep hearing is you worked in Australia, New York, and then Europe. By working across so many different markets and work culture, what were some key differences that really rise to the top when you think about those three different regions?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think, and also working in the industries I worked in, there was definitely, it was always like high pressure, tight deadline environments, like working at ad agencies, like agencies in general. The way that pressure is handled is very different. Like I'd actually say Australia is quite comparable to US work culture in the sense that people work really hard in Australia. there is like a real emphasis on this. I think people pride themselves on being like this a hardworking individual. I would say though, definitely in the US, I felt like there was more of a competition like within the workspace, because maybe that is just a reality of like scarce jobs and things
scarce
like that.
Growth.
Yeah, exactly. And having to really prove yourself, especially in a city like New York, right, where it is such a competitive environment. So I definitely felt that a little bit more, but I felt like Australia and US are very comparable in terms of you really bring your A game and you're a hard worker and you really pride yourself on that. Moving to Europe, I would say definitely people still work hard, but it's not as intense for sure. Like people really take their holidays and their break time very seriously. And I think generally that culture is changing globally. Like burnout is a real thing now, and it has real consequences, not just for companies. If they have employees on burnout, it's a huge issue for them. So I do feel like globally that general culture is changing, but I'd say in Europe it is definitely, people respect that a lot more. I would also say what's really interesting is how decisions are made in different culturally. Even from country to country, it's really unique. I think how feedback is given. The Dutch are known to be very direct. So if you're in Netherlands, where I am, feedback is given pretty directly, like in day-to-day life and from clients to feedback, which actually is really great. It means you cut through all this stuff and then it's okay, what do we need to change? What do we need to do? Let's move forward. So I do actually really appreciate that. It can be a little bit jarring at first. And I think especially coming from an American work culture where actually it's not very direct.
There's the sandwich method. There's how do I warm up to getting there? Yep. There's definitely a lot of strategies people put into place to be able to give feedback. And even then, sometimes it's not the full feedback. Yeah.
Like the amount of times we'd be like working on something and then the last round comes in and the clients are just like, we can't do this. We don't like it. And it's like, how did we get this far in the process? And I think it's a real cultural thing. So I think that's one thing that's great about the Netherlands, but obviously it's very different for each country. So working with countries like in the UK or in Sweden and Italy, like all very different. But I love that actually. That's why the reason I wanted to travel is like that you get to experience that and really see it and see that it can be done a billion different ways, and not one way is necessarily right or wrong. Some might be more efficient than others, but there's also something nuanced about, okay, this is how people get it done here in their own way. So it's cool to be able to witness that.
Yeah. And then, like you said, in the beginning, it might be jarring, and then you have to adopt those methods. And then if you move again, then you have to unlearn and learn the new culture, way of working, and unspoken and spoken norms, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then there's so many unspoken norms, you realize, which, and it's also interesting how you yourself shift in that process as well. Like you do definitely have to assimilate a little bit wherever you go. But then there's also ways that you can still preserve yourself and how you came up and how you did things. And it is nice, I think, sometimes, especially if you grew up somewhere and you were really like always felt, yes, this is how we all do things. When you come out of that context to really witness like, oh, okay, this is really unique. Actually, this feels unique to me here because it's a very something culturally from where I grew up. So
what has been the weirdest unspoken norm that you picked up on and you're like, this is a thing here, I just don't understand? And
I think one thing that I've picked up on that actually is not so much that it's a norm, it's more something that I just wish I had done earlier, is actually just the being really direct thing. I think like a lot of obviously your early career too, when you first start working, you're really trying to be like, please everyone, make sure everyone's happy with what you're doing. And obviously this comes with as you get older too, you just have less time to do that and you need to focus on what is important. But I think actually being really direct, whether it's like in the way you do emails, and obviously direct in the sense like just very clear and very to the point. If you don't like something, it's actually okay to say that. You just have to explain why. Or if you don't understand something, it's okay to do that too. I think that's definitely something I've felt a lot more here. And I think maybe now when I communicate with people that maybe in the US or Australia, it can come off as a little bit as more direct. But I actually think it's just something that I wish I had done more of even when I was younger, even though maybe at the time I felt a bit like, oh, I can't behave like this because I'm like a junior or someone.
Yeah, and you're a woman and you're brown,
yeah, of course,
right? So I think those things play a huge role because when you're even using the word direct, I'm feeling like, oh, like the word mean comes to my mind immediately when I hear the word direct. And that's because we've been socialized, right? We've been taught from a young age that women, especially if you're brown or Asian, you can't be direct because it's mean. Or like when we see directness personified or emulated by men, it's usually given in a very mean and cutthroat way. Yeah. So I feel like there's a failure of the way it's been associated where men are, like we've seen it, men are bosses and they are direct. Women are bossy when they do the same things, same behaviors, and they're mean and cruel if they do the same things, right? Yeah. Like a man and a woman can literally say the same mean phrase, and the woman is the one that's going to get categorized as mean and bitchy, and the man's going to be like, oh, that's just how he is. And a lot of hardworking or like successful men have to be that way. They're not all normal. Like it's normalized. Yeah. And so I think what you're also sharing though is that is a very American perception of directness, of feedback, of behavior versus what I'm hearing is what you've been seeing. Hey, directness can be provided without being mean. It's about clarity and clear communication so that we can all get to the same place that we're all trying to get to. And I think that is also what I'm picking up on in the way that you're describing it.
Yeah, definitely. And that's it. And I think it's also just honesty because also I think people maybe are scared to voice their true opinion because maybe I don't get it. And so if I criticize it, is it me showing that or question it? Am I like revealing a little vulnerability or something? And so often it's even just being able to ask the question like, why would we do it that way? Or why is this the solution? Sometimes it's hard to even ask that. But I think just seeing other people first ask it to me or give that feedback to me, at first you're like, okay, well, actually, yeah, it's a good point and we do need to explain it. And also it's really important to validate that stuff, obviously, before you go to market and before you bring anything out into the world. So I think it's also just like the honesty, which I would argue is also maybe the level of honesty is higher in at least in our team. I feel like we're a startup, we're a small company, we have a great founder-led culture, and they're very direct and down to earth. And I think we'll ask questions and really encourage us to ask questions and challenge. And I really appreciate that actually. And I think it makes it so much easier to then just be like, okay, actually, yeah, I don't understand this, or I don't think this is the best way to do it. And not feel like you're causing like some kind of a drama that other people are going to be like, I can't believe they see. It's just, oh yeah, cool. That's just part of the day. And then we move on and we solve it. That's definitely something I've picked up.
That's really great. What's the size of Fabricant?
When I first started, I think, it was 10 of us. So it was super small. And now there's 20 of us, which actually is, I really like that as a size actually. But we work with people all over the world. And that's also something that's really amazing that's come, I think, through the pandemic, remote work. So yeah.
I feel like this could be a perfect time to maybe tell us a little bit more about the Fabricant. I know when you look up the Fabricant, it's known as a digital fashion house leading fashion industry towards a new sector of digital only clothing. What does that mean? What do you all do? And when you say product, like what is the product?
That's the line I think that we've used for a long time. Digital
Is it evolving?
Fashion house. It's definitely evolving. I think digital fashion house, I guess like the original vision was like a label. The way that a fashion house, a label is set up to produce physical clothing, the Fabricant were really like, how do we set ourselves up to produce digital clothing and show the world that there is an industry for digital only clothing? And that's been their mission since day one, since they launched in 2018. Where it was just Kerry and Amber, two of the founders, Amber being a fashion student who just managed to fight her way through fashion school and actually get her portfolio digital only. So to not produce physical collection, which at the time they were like, she almost didn't get past. But she fought for it because she believed in it. And she also saw like a big issue was just the waste of producing a collection, the cost, the waste, what's going to happen to it. And Kerry was actually, he's a 3D artist, was working in the ad industry and content industry. And I think that both of them saw that, okay, there's powerful storytelling that can happen. Fashion is all about storytelling. It's all about creating beautiful visuals. And you can really do that all digitally. And so they set about showing the world how you could do this through key visuals, through dresses. They created the first digital only dress that was auctioned on Ethereum for $10,000 at the time, roughly about $10,000, which was a huge milestone.
It's pretty huge.
In 2018, and we obviously got all the headlines, everyone kind of talking about how ridiculous it was, what's happened, all the kind of good and bad press that it created. That's been their mission since day one. And since then, they brought on Adriana, another one of the co-founders who kind of heads up more the commercial side, and started growing the company. But first, it was really just servicing physical fashion clients to help with their like digital transformation process. So showing them how to use 3D tools, how to create their collections. And it really accelerated during the pandemic, obviously, because they needed that support. But I think the Fabricant's goal was always, like you said, how do we show the world that actually, because all those clients were still producing physical clothing, they were just using digital internally. So it wasn't like it got beyond the buyers, like that was it. But we still wanted to show the world, well, how can digital fashion stand alone on itself?
Can we back up for a second and talk about, okay, so when you have a brand who creates physical clothing, physical fashion, what does it mean when they create a digital fashion item? How do I buy it? Where do I buy it? What do I use it for? What is that digital fashion?
So I think the primary way that brands currently use it today is actually for their design process, prototyping and sampling process. So right now, back 10 years ago, traditionally how it was done is to produce a collection, you physically obviously had to make it. So you'd send it to pattern makers, and create the patterns. There'd be several run-throughs of just the pattern itself, where you'd be, testing out the garments. You'd probably be sending that around the world. The pattern makers might be in Asia. They produce in the factory. You're literally sampling, testing materials, testing buttons, testing colors, testing trims, like everything. That process itself of just getting to a designed collection, it's really expensive. It covers the whole world. Like it's a global kind of supply chain process. And actually you end up wasting a lot, right? Because you're still in an early stage. You're developing, you're prototyping, you're testing. A lot of it goes to waste. So what companies can now do is they can do that process in 3D. And it's super powerful that you can bring, so say you're creating a jacket, you prototype design it all in 3D on different body shapes. You can customize the body shapes. You can really try and get the fit right, the shape right. And then once you're happy with that, you're able to maybe then get it physically sampled. So you're already cutting out a huge part of the process. The other amazing thing you can do is actually, that was what we worked with clients, was there's the process of first getting the collection. Then you have, once you're happy with the collection, you've got to produce it physically to photograph and show to buyers. Because then what the buyers choose is ultimately what actually gets put into mass production. Oh, okay. So again, you've still got this step of this is another round. There's another round where you actually go through buyers, and they're actually like, okay, yeah, we want to buy this. I want to confirm the colorways. So you could have made a jacket with 10 colorways. All of those had to be produced, but then only the black one is the one that makes it through. So what you can do with digital, again, is do as many colorways as you want and actually render out like photorealistic quality images that you can actually show to buyers. So the buyers can even still be in that digital process with you. You can send them fabric samples so they have a sense of the fabric, but still you're working primarily in digital. You haven't had to produce yet maybe many physical copies of the item. And then once the buyers are like, okay, these are the ones that we want, that's when you go into physical. So by that way, you're already delaying that process again and reducing a huge amount of waste.
So much waste. Yeah.
Yeah. And also a huge amount of cost. And also during the pandemic, literally just, it was not possible to do that because everything was shut down. So that was really like what we're starting to do. But again, you still stop before you get to the consumer. Like the consumer's not seeing any of this. They're just seeing, they're going to see the physical product. And so we were really trying to think about how do we go beyond that and get consumers engaging with digital fashion. Okay. And that was when we launched the Fabricant platform to focus on that. And so now to answer your question, like what can you now for brands that really want to engage in digital fashion beyond just like this internal process, there are more ways that you can actually engage with it because people are picking up, okay, there are more uses for digital fashion. It's becoming more prevalent. So AR is a big one. We have an AR app. There's also several other companies that have their own dedicated AR apps where you can actually go and buy digital fashion or try digital fashion on. And AR is a big one.
And do you try it on so that you can then order the physical item, or do you just wear it in digital?
Potentially. And that's what's really interesting, though, because the other kind of insight in social media, obviously, is that you have a lot of people buying clothes to wear for photos that maybe they wear once or twice. It also creates this kind of very wasteful behavior. There's companies that literally were doing things like send us your photo and we'll dress you. So it looks like you're wearing it. Digital dressing was also a thing. It still is a thing, but not as much. But AR is a form of digital dressing, and the technology is still developing. So obviously the body tracking is not as good as face tracking, but it gets better and better every year. It's incredible, like how the advances they're making on it. And so I think AR eventually will become a substitute for a lot of people. For example, being in the call with you, I can put on my digital outfit. I don't necessarily need to buy a jacket or buy some cool glasses or whatever it is, wear my cool accessories, and that's it. And that's fine.
And then you prevent consumerism, right? Then you stop perpetuating huge consumerism. So interesting. The other use that I have seen, and I'd love to know, because I know Fabricant does this, is you guys have partnered with brands so that you can create digital items that are then worn in immersive spaces. Could you talk a little bit more about that? Like, where are people wearing this? What is an immersive space?
Yeah, definitely. So I think AR is one thing we produce, but we also produce wearables for different metaverses. So for Decentraland and for Ready Play Me, which actually integrates with places like Spatial and many other kind of immersive experiences. And that's where you basically can take the item, the 3D item, because that's the other thing that I think brands realized. When you bring something into the 3D world as a 3D file, there's so much more you can do with it. If you've got a physical jacket, you've got one physical jacket. You can photograph it, you can put it on someone and kind of video it. That's great. If you have a jacket in 3D, you can duplicate it as many times. You can customize it as you like. You can also bring it into different games. You can create content with it through simulation and VFX. And obviously now with all the Web3 stuff, there's a lot of stuff you can do just bringing it on chain and kind of selling it as a validated digital asset. You can really sell it. So I think brands are also just seeing, obviously we produce physical, but having that same asset as a 3D artifact is very valuable. So even just being able to produce fashion 3D, one day that item could become physical. Who knows? Really up to what people want to do with it.
It sounds like that could be market testing. If you create a digital jacket and you release it into a bunch of different worlds and you see it really takes off, then it's maybe we do create the physical version.
Yeah. Exactly. And when we design, we actually design everything and test it in Unreal Engine. So we're designing all this stuff to be supported by game engines. So we're also building for the future where games, and they already are, the most dominant form of media that we all consume. It will be gaming. We design everything so that it is game engine ready. And I think that is something like future-proofing your items. And I think that's what a lot of brands realize too, like the Nike drop. Nike just announcing them partnering with Fortnite. LVMH also announcing them partnering with Epic. These are game engines. So it's really interesting to see these massive brands now really embracing this.
Fashion.
This is one thing that the Fabricant founders always say.
Why has gaming and gaming culture become so important for fashion?
The gaming world, it's massive. And I think if you don't work in the industry, you don't realize how massive it is. But actually, it's huge. I don't work in gaming, but I do actually follow a lot of gaming kind of podcasts and read about it because I just am really fascinated by it. It's huge. The amount of people that engage with games and spend money in games and their identities in games, I think this is a really critical thing. It's about your digital identity. And so many games now are more than just come and play as this character and get through. It's about connecting. They're social. It's really about finding a part of yourself that you didn't realize you had in your physical world. People build real-time social communities in games and they want to express themselves. And that's going to just become more and more predominant. And you need to dress those people. They all need fashion. They want to go beyond that. And if anything,
they want to have options.
Exactly. Right? They want to have options. And I think especially now, it's all about being able to express yourself. So how you express yourself digitally is going to be huge. And I think that's where digital fashion is the missing piece with that. Whatever they wear in the physical and digital, and even go beyond that. What else can you do in the digital that you can't do in the physicals? And you can be so many different characters. So I think people's digital wardrobes will totally eclipse their physical wardrobes in the future and so we're building for that. And there's going to be thousands and thousands of brands and creators and people designing for games. There already is. It's already there. It's not just coming. Fortnite, what they just released with their creator program is massive. It's telling.
What did they launch?
They basically launched a platform where it's you can create your own worlds within Fortnite and upload your own assets. So you could build your own world, and they invested a lot of money into it. They invested a lot of their team into it. it. And I think that's really powerful and telling of where they see it going. It's like they're building an ecosystem out for people to come and build on top of, not just producing their own single narrative in their world. And obviously Fortnite is a huge one. And there's many other games like that. And there will be more spaces like that as the tech gets better, as people can access these on their phone or wherever they are. Gaming is something we're definitely building for. And I think actually anyone working in media should be thinking about, I really think gaming will be the dominant media. And it is already, but maybe not for everyone, but really it will be the dominant way we consume pop culture. Who knows, maybe the next 5-10 years.
When you think about where gaming is now versus where you can see the potential of gaming going, and by potential, I don't even mean like the technology isn't there, but more like utility and the creativity of people wanting to use gaming as a media, co-creating with gamers and co-creating with creators of games. Like what potential, could you paint a little bit of that hypothesis that you're imagining?
I think they'll just become their own like economies, right? I think that will be serviced by thousands of people creating content, creating experiences, creating and
having their own currency, right?
Yeah,
like,
from these worlds. Exactly. You already see that with like Roblox and Minecraft and Fortnite and many other games. I think there'll be like Upwork in game worlds where you can go and you can, there already is. This is the thing. All this stuff is already happening, but it's just happening on a more niche level. But yeah, I just believe they will become like their own little economies. And I don't mean the game world might not necessarily feel like a first person shooter. It could be more like a Sims kind of social kind of thing as well. So I think there will be, it's not just going to be we're all going to be playing Battlefield or something, but it will be just like the merging between everyday life into a gaming kind of environment or gaming context. Like even now, if you did that in a metaverse, you're in like what you could call a game environment, game engine environment. But it's interesting, like the more that I do events and meetups with people in a spatial or a decentralized, you see like the benefits of it over doing just a Zoom call or something, right? There are benefits. You can be in a shared space. You can break off into different things. You can all be looking at, there's like stuff you can do together. And I think that context will also grow. So you'll also need to have your digital identity that you take with you to these different contexts as well.
Whenever I look up Metaverse, I feel like everyone has their own definition of Metaverse. How are you, or how is Fabricant defining Metaverse?
I don't know how the Fabricant define that's. I won't speak on behalf of the Fabricant because I'm sure that.
Okay, you could just speak for yourself.
We define it different. I'm not too sure exactly how. There's many ways, but I think the way I would personally define it, it is essentially like a social virtual environment. And so for me, when I think about Metaverse, I don't actually necessarily think of high resolution graphics. Like I know that's one type of Metaverse that is going to be like fully VR headset enabled. But then I think there's also the experience of Metaverse that is like what we already experience on social platforms. Essentially like virtual spaces, dedicated virtual spaces where people can come together, gather, be social, do actions together that isn't possible in the physical world. You could argue that...
Is this a Metaverse, what you and I are doing?
I wouldn't say this is necessarily just because it's just maybe, I'm not sure actually. I think it's more like
technically we're not in a shared space, right? Or are we? Like
we are. I would say we are in a shared space.
Okay.
But I'd say this still feels like a call. I think the other element is that there is an interface on it that has some kind of element of spatiality. Maybe
there's a spatial environment.
Yeah, or like even like exactly a sense of it has its own time. You think of a feed, right? You share your Twitter feed with all these other people. There's a sense of time, there's a sense of like all that type of thing. And I think there are lo-fi metaverses too. Like you find metaverses on your mobile phone that are more like pixelated, but that's still a lo-fi experience. There's still a sense of like space. There's still a sense of its own time in that world. Like it has its own, it governs, it has its own like rules, like in the sense of like physics or gravity or whatever you would call that in a virtual space. And so I think there's like a spectrum of these lo-fi, very lo-fi metaverses to like these very high resolution metaverses. And obviously each one has different tech requirements and each one is good for different things. So the things like the events that we would plan in spatial are different to the events we would plan in decentraland and very different to the events we might plan in, say, a Roblox. And I think each metaverse caters to a different type of experience. There are many metaverses, there'll be even more. But I think it's just ultimately like a virtual shared space with its own governing physics and laws.
I feel like this is making me think about the role of fashion and culture and community. Like we know fashion can't really exist without culture, and then culture can't really exist without community. And when fashion and community is digital. Like, how do you cultivate community? How do you cultivate connection? But then culture isn't something that you're cultivating. It's really driven by the people. So I guess I'm curious how you think about all of those for your role or from your world.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Like, I actually think that individuals are the culture starters. They start the culture and then it gets perpetuated into a mass culture. So I actually think, for example, like Paris Fashion Week happened a couple of weeks ago. There were some incredible shows. Those were all cultural moments. They were initiated by a brand that was also leveraging, obviously, a lot of other cultures and other ideas. But pushing that forward into the world creates a cultural moment that people pick up on and will replicate, and it gets spread. Like, obviously you need the community to, like, otherwise it's just a moment in time. If no one kind of responds to it, what is it? But I really think there was a great talk I saw recently but it was these two kind of artists talking about the need to create images or visuals that were visionary, and they were actually talking about it in the context of Mars. Ironically, they were talking about how Mars is like our next big. They were talking about how culture had felt like it was stagnating, in the sense like all the kind of images of the future that we're living now were created in like the 90s and 80s. And we haven't really moved beyond that. There hasn't really been a really powerful narrative that's moved us beyond that, and how important it is for people, especially artists and creators and also cultural entities like musicians, all these people and communities, to really put out visionary images and visuals to really inspire, to get out of this like stagnating consumerism. And so I think that's actually something that the Fabricant did really well, which is why we have such a great reputation and people know our visuals, is that we were able to put out really powerful visuals to showcase what digital fashion is. Otherwise, people don't get it. Arguably, I totally understand why. But when you can show someone an image of the world, what the future could look like with fashion, with whatever stories you're trying to tell, it's really powerful. And that is what creates culture, these really powerful visuals. And I think a lot of communities are connected to an aesthetic. That's where fashion becomes a part of it, whether it's the symbolism, the music they all love. They all a lot of communities will have a visual language that they use to identify themselves and express themselves, and a way to connect. There's something there is a visual language to communities for sure. They have this like cultural, they have this very aesthetic kind of language that crosses music, visual, all that type of thing, but it really brings them together. Fashion labels, that's what they do, right? They create these really incredible stories and visuals, like so powerful. The visuals that the fashion industry creates, like they are master storytellers. And I think that's why they're able to get people to buy clothing, right? Like go beyond this like functional need to do something and want to be a part of something. It is really powerful. And so doing it for digital fashion is definitely more challenging because you lose that tangibility of being able to wear it and have a picture of yourself. But that's where I think people are adapting. People are starting to, with PFPs, with AR filters, and also now with being able to wear things in the metaverse, or just being able to show that you own something. These are all ways to signify, okay, I'm part of this movement, I'm part of this community.
So can you tell us a little bit about like the Fabricant platform? Because I know that's a place where you're really engaging with everyone, and there's a lot of power of co-creation happening there. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. So the platform is it's built on Flow blockchain. The infrastructure is on blockchain. And basically it's a platform where we want people to be able to create their own digital fashion pieces. So not just buy, but also create, to trade. So there's a marketplace, and then have ways to wear it. So whether that's with AR or through wearables and things like that. The creation part, what's really interesting that we offer that I think is really unique to us, is actual co-creation. So you literally can come and choose from a palette of garments, colors, materials, all designed by different people. So it doesn't always have to be a collection designed by one label or one artist. You can have materials by different artists. You can have garments by different artists, and you come and you actually put the combinations together to create your unique collection. And I think that's something really only possible in digital from obviously a scale production point of view. You really can't do that physically, or you can, but very low scale. That's really powerful. But then also it's like really creating this new type of consumer behavior where you're not just like buying what someone has designed, you're part of the design process. Yeah. And I think that's something that actually consumers want, but it's just obviously very hard to facilitate that and deliver on that promise. But now with digital, and when you have like a completely digital kind of chain of production, it's totally possible to do that. And that's something I think that the Fabricant is offering. We're also obviously doing like we've done several drops now where we're connecting to a physical product. So we've done like a digital twin of a physical product, which is also something I think people will want more of. So I'm buying this sunglasses, like we just did a drop with Weekday. They created the physical, we created the digital. So if you bought both of them, you could wear the physical, but then you can also wear the digital in AR. So there is like this like growing desire for, oh, but I also want the digital one to go with that. So I can wear it in photos and things like that and share it. Plus the digital one can have different effects that the physical one might not be able to have. So you get the best of both worlds. You can also trade. There's a marketplace as well. So you can trade your items. So you can become like, the goal is eventually you have people that are maybe not designed as traditional fashion designers, but they can come, they can create a collection, they can sell it too.
Can I come on Fabricant and make something?
Yeah, you can. Actually, you can. Even now you can do that. We have a collection, the capers, which are 3 hats that you can actually customize the colors and the materials with this amazing glitch artist based in the US called Ellie Pritt. And all the materials animated and they're all her original art. So it's like this new kind of way that artists can have their work collected and interacted with through fashion.
So interesting.
So yeah, it's just, I think what's really interesting about what we do is it's just like opening up all these different ways people can interact with fashion and what is a fashion product. What can a fashion product be?
What was the decision, or why is it important for Fabricant's platform to be on chain? Like, why is it on blockchain?
So I think that the most important thing is it's the authentication of a digital asset. So obviously it's very hard to verify, hey, it's a digital file, essentially. You've got a visual, you've got an image, you've got JPEG, as we like to call it. It's a JPEG, right? That's very easy to duplicate. It's very easy to create copies. There's no way to validate that it's authentic as just a normal consumer. So bringing it on chain adds that level of authentication. And so it can hold its value and it protects it against all the scams and things like that. And obviously that still happens, but you have this extra layer of protection. And I think that's why so many fashion brands are also just looking at, even if they're remaining physical, to still find ways to authenticate that physical item on chain so that it is validated. So it can be like resold, that it can be validated, because it also protects their product and their IP for themselves and for the owner. So that's a really critical part of it. It right now is the only way to truly validate the authenticity of an item. Obviously, like building on chain presents a lot of challenges, especially in terms of like how people pay for it. There's a huge onboarding challenge that all projects, everyone operating in this space has, is how do we bring people beyond that first wave of crypto native people that are willing to go deep and learn how to set up wallets and understand different currencies and how to do that stuff. Most people don't want to do that. Most people have zero desire to do that.
So it's also the narrative that's been created around it, right? Like the narrative and also, plus like the jargon, it just automatically feels like it's inaccessible and it's not for everyone.
I'd say it's the narrative, but it's literally also the user experience. Like it's literally inaccessible for a lot of people.
Yeah.
We do drops and we already see like the restrictions in different, especially now, more restrictions depending on your country. Like paying with a credit card, you really take for granted how easy that is. That you can, with Shopify or whatever, anyone in the world can buy your product. That is not possible in the current space we're in with even using the best on-ramp tech that we have. There's still a lot of limitations. So that's like a huge issue. The validation of a digital asset is hugely important. So obviously the tech will get better. And once it gets better, more people will come on. Yeah, that I would say is one of the setbacks of using technology. And also just like the way that the web tech runs, like the way that credit card transactions can literally get processed like that. That is not how the blockchain runs.
Yeah.
Like it's slow. It has issues. It has downtime. There's literally times when you do a drop and because the chain is down or because whatever gas prices, people won't buy a product, and that's crazy. If you like are a retailer, that's like a huge no-no. Yeah. Oh, you're saying that there's times when people literally who want to pay are not going to be able to pay. That is a huge red flag. So I think
And if you have multiple people trying to make that same purchase, it might actually drive the gas fee up.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which becomes counterproductive because that's not the behavior that you would want to prevent in real life.
No, exactly, right? Like you're just like the behavior in real life is if you want to buy something, it's available for you right then and there.
And you want like a big launch. You want all the foot traffic.
Yeah, you want all the people to come in. Exactly.
Right. That's not the same.
No, exactly. And all the crazy strategies that projects have to get around this it's really complicated. And the way that have to design a drop to avoid this. Like we're not on ETH, so we actually luckily don't have gas fees on Flow, which is really incredible. We have done, like we were running a promo. We were asking people to mint a piece of art on ETH. And I remember at the time it was like the gas fees were really high. And literally we were like, okay, hold off doing it because you're almost asking people to spend money just to participate. And that's just not acceptable for a large scale audience. So yeah, there's definitely setbacks to it. We're investing now because we really believe in the future of it and that all the stuff around it is going to get better.
So there's a bunch of other questions I really want to get into. We talked about when I asked you about the vision you had for how the metaverse might manifest and how we'll interact with it. What are some of your fears around the intersection of all these emerging technologies and our relationship with it?
I think like with digital fashion, to be honest, like I think it's not so much I don't know if it's like I have that many fears about it because I really see how it outweighs the negatives. But I think there is also the danger that just as we've created like extreme amounts of physical waste in the fashion industry, we'll contribute to extreme amounts of digital waste because all this stuff still consumes a lot of energy. It's not like we're just suddenly carbon
digital space isn't like it does still have a carbon footprint. It
100%.
Does still have
everything's hosted on servers. Everything is on chain. Like everything, it's still running. All this stuff is active and running. So we still have a carbon footprint. And I think like it's easy to maybe, I guess, to create this new world of digital waste. I think that's something to be mindful of. Although I do still think it's we're really far away from that. But I think like the narrative so far as well about people pushing for blockchains to become more energy efficient is already pushing us in the right direction. So it's not like a huge fear I have. Yeah, with digital fashion, to be honest, like not a huge, like I actually see, and maybe I'm so brainwashed that I don't see it. But really, I think it's just amazing because it's going to mean so many more people can come into the fashion space and create fashion and do shows, and that becomes
creates access.
The access is incredible, like you know what it allows and also what you can do. I'm like excited to see what fashion will become even when more people can create it. I think like AI is one that I don't want to get into because that's like a bit of a rabbit hole but I think that is one where
another episode.
Yeah, exactly, where there's more fears, obviously.
Are there certain like ethical considerations that you think people who are in the space of digital fashion or metaverse building have to keep in mind?
I think it's just like right now where it's at, it's still you need to be quite technically savvy, right? The people that are engaging with this are really people that understand 3D and gaming and tech, right? A blender, right? And a lot of that's also still a very small audience. A person that's really into fashion might feel intimidated and off-put by that and so might not engage with it. And so maybe there is that barrier, but there are more and more software and tools to make that more seamless. So I think as that gets better, that will be good. In terms of the Web3 though, or just in terms of blockchain technology in general, I think, I think the thing that is the most that will be quite challenging, like the decentralization. How will that play out? What will that mean? And not so much a fear. It's also kind of something that's interesting. What will a fashion label look like and operate?
If it's decentralized.
But also if it's like really through co-creation, like what does that mean for the IP of a
what does it mean? Credit? How do you give compensation?
How do you do all of that? And what does it even mean to operate as a label? Will it dilute the power that labels? Because I think that's one thing too, right? Like labels very centralized, but they also through that are able to create these really beautiful, coordinated, powerful visuals. If you lose that, do you also dilute that vision that maybe a small I don't know, so I think there's a balance. Do you think we'll see a rise of a brand core and then the co-created line of that brand? Yeah, definitely. I think that's one way it will happen first. So the brand will still maintain like a certain level of creativity and IP, and then there's like customizations that people can take on and extend. That's what we see now with a lot of Web3 projects, where it's like people are able to leverage the IP of the original collection, but then they can create like derivatives. So that's like like I think that's like definitely a valid use case. I think what'll become more interesting, and people are definitely experimenting this, is like when it becomes like a more unstructured creative process, which can be facilitated now through all these different ways we connect and operate. Yeah, what will that look like? How will it change the industry? How will it change what does it even mean to be a designer? So I think there is, I wouldn't say it's a fear, it's more just like a unknown.
Like you wonder.
Yeah, exactly. Like what is that unknown?
I feel like one thing that just sparked for me as you were talking is once you provide enough tools and creative mechanisms to customize, will people be able to put hate messages on a brand's item? And someone can put a hate message on their shirt right now and walk around the street, right? My mind starts wondering, maybe it's already happening in niche spaces and I'm just not aware of it, where someone could be like, oh, this is an amazing tool. I am now going to every day wear racist slurs on my outfit virtually and people can't really find me. I don't know. That's something that sparked for me when I think about the potential misuses here, right?
Yeah. No, I think, look, that's definitely a valid use case, but I'd say people do that now already.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
You can already go
in the
to
physical
those,
world.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Look, Kanye put White Lives Matter at a premier fashion event, and that's already a thing. And I also think hate speech, what defines hate speech changes. It really depends on what is the dominant culture, and it's really hard to predict and police it. And I think like attempts to do, while justified, definitely, right? There's definitely, you need to have things like that in place. I don't think you can necessarily stop it totally. And I also don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, because I think it's like when those opinions get voiced and you realize they exist, then people can come and find ways to deal with that opinion. The more that it is hidden and bubbling and kind of turning into something really horrible, I think that's when it gets really dangerous. When it's maybe there is a way for it to be out in the open, it can be addressed, right? Like it can be like, okay, there is a whole group of people that believe this, which you might think is crazy. Why do they believe that? How do we, like it becomes something you can address.
I hadn't thought about it that way, which is definitely interesting. In some ways, when racism is hidden, or like when sexism is hidden, you almost feel like, oh, I guess sexism just doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
There is no patriarchy. But then when it's out and you see the signs of it out in the open, you're right, then we can talk about it and talk about, so how do we like address this? How do we as a society, what are we normalizing here and what do we not want to normalize? I have to say, I hadn't thought about it that way. Okay. All right.
Yeah, I think you have to it's all stuff you have to deal with collectively. I think it's really hard to, and like as much as you can look at, obviously there's examples that are terrible, but I like to always think people came to those conclusions somehow. Generally, people aren't born hateful, evil, right? Like they've somehow gotten to this point through whatever events in their life, the influences. And I think it's always a conversation. It's always the best way to do it, because otherwise it becomes dangerous. It becomes, insular, what's out there. So and I do hope actually with digital fashion that it does allow more people to express themselves. Like fundamentally, that's what we want, that people are out there expressing their most authentic self. And that could cause a lot of controversy. Like we already see that, right? Like we released our latest collection. We dropped this visual of this woman, and she's like 3D character, obviously, but she's obviously a large woman. So not the normal slim body type. She's a large woman, and she's like twerking with this beaded outfit on. And it was posted on the Next Museum Instagram, which is where it was being shown. It was really interesting to the feed to see the comments equally as positive as just negative. Like people were just like, why would you create this? Is so horrible, it's ugly, it's disgusting, da 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 da. And that was just like someone who was like a large woman dancing. But people saw that as really disgusting. And I think like putting images like that out there in the world, it challenges people, obviously. But actually we were glad that for us, it's like putting images like out there that are challenging is actually good. It's good to get a response. It's good to actually show people something that maybe for some it will make them hate us, but for some it might make them see the world in a different way and expand their sense of, hey, okay, this is a form of beauty. This is a form of a different form that kind of pushes that a little bit. So I think that's something that it's hard to get that expression out there, but with digital technology, you can do so much more as it becomes more accessible. We hope to see more images that are going to challenge us, images and visuals and stories that are really going to challenge us. But hopefully it's going to make us more empathetic and be more open-minded to like, okay, these are all the different ways people can exist and express themselves. Like we already see that with the trend, like it's Pride Month. That's such a huge, like where we are today. Can you imagine 20 years ago how different the narrative was? And that's come through a lot of hard work and vulnerability and people like putting
and advocacy. It's interesting. Like I hadn't thought about it that way at all. And I think to your point, I loved your example of seeing both positive and negative responses to that video and seeing that they were pretty equal. And what that shows is, to your point, by leveraging digital technology, we're able to put that opinion out there. You're able to make a stance that you believe that this is an image that's beautiful, that deserves to take up space. And it's an expression of creativity and beauty. By the brand taking that stance, it's saying, no, we're good with this. This is what we think should be here. And I think what we're seeing more and more of is it's not like certain images or certain representation is only normalized on a certain month. We're seeing more and more brands and more just people put themselves out there, period, in their most authentic self. And I do think it's beautiful. It does make it a little bit more open to getting hate messages or like opposing views in general. And I get what you're saying, like by someone saying, oh, this is ugly, they're getting like, no, this is beautiful. They're getting challenged.
Yeah, exactly. You're challenging their kind of view on the world, which of course people don't like to be challenged.
Right.
It's not an easy thing to be done. Yeah. I think we've all been we get challenged all the time. And often like we see things that we're like, oh my God, that's crazy. But then you might on the flip side be like, oh, I didn't think about it that way, or like hearing.
I mean, I literally just said that, right? Like even I was like, oh, like I hadn't thought about it that way. How does your parents describe what you do, or how would they describe what you do?
You know what? I don't even know. I think maybe they think I work in digital something. Honestly, I don't even go there. I think they think I work in marketing. Marketing is the easiest one to explain. But not even my parents. Like a lot of my friends don't understand what I do. When I first started working, when I worked in digital fashion, there was first what is that? Okay, we get it. You make 3D clothing. Okay, maybe get that. Then when moving into, we're working Web3 and people can co-create and do stuff, that's like a complete, and to a lot of people, that still is a complete like black box of, I just don't understand that. Sometimes I'm good at explaining and other days I'm not, depending on how I'm feeling. But I think the narrative with the metaverse maybe helped a little bit, but also didn't help. I think a lot of people just have a hard time seeing how the digital world is as present to me and many people as the physical. But I think a lot of people,
it's no longer like digital isn't the plan B.
No, exactly. I don't think, I really don't see like a separate thing. We're constantly moving between digital and physical. Yeah, I actually think that boundary will just continue to blur. Like the world we inhabit is both digital and physical all the time. You constantly have your phone with you. You're constantly connecting into digital spaces. Like actually you're more connected digitally. You're just as connected digitally as you are physically. But a lot of people, I think, really picture this like 3D virtual environment when actually it's just the internet and it's just how we connect. So I think when you get into like digital fashion and gaming, it all seems like the future and unreal and things like that. But
it's now.
Yeah, exactly. But it is actually... It's present. It's very present. Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you one last question before we do a rapid round of questions. I know you recently transitioned from being the head of community to being the head of marketing and growth. How are you approaching that? And what's the difference to you?
Yeah. So I think being head of community is very much focused on how do we grow and keep this community engaged, keep giving them programs and activities and products and whatever it is to keep them growing, keep them engaged so they can become the people that are bringing other people in. So it's really a focus on retention, but also events, engagement, things like that. I think transitioning now to more of a marketing and growth role, which is still, community is definitely still a key part of it. It's really now about, like the storytelling and how do we like connect, resonate with new people? How do we like connect with them? What is our story? How do we present ourselves? So it's going to be interesting. It's going to take me back to my days back in the ad world for sure.
So when you say storytelling, you're talking about the storytelling of the brand, the Fabricant too, right? And then the community storytelling versus the brand. I'm curious, like, how are you parsing those? Or maybe there is no parsing and I think it is. It's like, it's not even, it's like the storytelling that you need for someone who doesn't know who you are. And then what's the storytelling for someone that
knows who you are. Like, how do you interact with them? So I think it's a different type of storytelling that will happen for this more of a marketing acquisition type role. But also I'm really excited about doing it. So obviously I started when it was like people were buying banner ads and emails and doing paid stuff. And now we're in a world where it's like portrait only, people are only in TikTok and YouTube. Like where people spend their time online is so different now.
Yeah.
And with OpenAI as well and ChatGPT, it's people are in these tools rather than just surfing the internet. People are spending more time in tools where they just get what they need and they get out. They're spending less time on these like public or whatever ad kind of backed network. So it's like, how do we connect with people? So that will definitely be a challenge. But I'm excited to see what that world is like. Because I haven't,
it's so much more interactive. Yeah,
exactly. And so much more about, I think there is a really strong community angle to it too.
Because you have to want to connect. You have to feel connected to the story to want to interact with it versus old age digital marketing was just one directional. And it was just like consume this message or consume this thing. I don't really need you to interact with it per se versus now it's that compel to action that makes it a little bit more complicated. Yeah,
exactly. And that's where I'm actually excited about my direct marketing conversion reports and all the stuff I used to do is getting back into the numbers. Actually, I'm excited about that. I am a little bit averse to the numbers and KPIs and things, but something about it this time is, you know what, I'm actually interested to see like how do people respond? How do you look at these different metrics and things like that? So yeah.
Amazing. Excited for you. Okay. So I'm going to kick off our rapid fire. Okay. Are you an introvert or extrovert?
Extrovert.
What helps you stay curious?
The internet.
What's one thing that you're deeply grateful for right now?
Definitely my family, stability, like just having that, very important.
If you could go back and give your 18-year-old self one piece of advice, what would it be?
Honestly, believe in yourself. I think that's one thing. I realized I would just want to do things. I was like, it's too hard. I'm not going to do it. I think there were so many things. If I had done it, I would have just nailed it. So I
relate to that hard. What is something you've been doing recently to nurture your mental health? Asking from one new mom to another new mom.
I try to meditate. It sometimes works. I used to be good at that stuff, but honestly, I don't know. Good question. I guess meditate. Yeah.
What's something you couldn't do without in your career? It could be anything, a routine, a person, a service.
Definitely now, like just the remote work culture. I don't know how people, especially being a parent, had to show up to an office every day at 9. That's crazy. Really hard.
Out of all the failures you've had in your life, whether it was a failure of never launching, a launch that didn't go so well, or something that didn't go great, what's your favorite failure?
Yeah, I guess the moments when I actually didn't act on the things I wanted to do. I think I would actually call those true failures, because not giving it a go basically was the failure. If I just given it a go and failed, it probably like it. So I think it was actually just the inaction.
Like what if you believed in yourself?
The fear. Yeah, the fears. Yeah.
How do you nurture or what encourages play in your life right now?
My child. Definitely.
If you weren't in this role, what else would you be doing?
I would love to be a writer. That would be my dream, and I'm working on that. Hopefully I can age into that one day. So yeah, that would just definitely be my dream.
Amazing. What do you think is up next for Metaverse, for digital fashion?
I think the focus, I'm excited about what Apple Vision Pro has, just the excitement it's created. I think that will help bolster us all right now that are facing all the negative stories. So I think right now that is something that's keeping people staying positive about immersive technology. But honestly, I think we really need to wait for the narrative to change a little bit. It's definitely tough right now in the Web3 and just metaverse space. And also in the world, like economically, like people, it's tough right now. So I think, and so I'd say I think that Apple Vision Pro has actually helped bring the excitement back to what immersive tech can be. So that I'd say is the next kind of exciting thing.
Who do you think is up next? Who's someone that the listeners I should be watching and learning from?
I would say there's all these like up and coming creators. TikTok, get on TikTok. All the entertainers on there, I'd say, are all the people that are up next.
In closing, where can people learn more about you, support your work?
I'm on Twitter and LinkedIn, Nirmala Shome, so that's easy. And then I have a Substack that I'm trying to get up and running.
Yeah, we'll link
Collective. It stands for Open Knowledge Collective. So that's something I'm working on. So you can also, I'm going to hope to be adding more there.
Amazing.
Soon. So yeah.
We're excited to see your writing come into that Substack. Nirmala, thank you so much for making the time for this call. I've learned so much and I'm so inspired by your whole story, by everything that you've shared today, your point of view. And I feel like you've opened up some of my aperture a little bit more towards where immersive fashion and immersive expression is going.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Reva. This was really fun. You should do it again.
This was really fun. Yes. A part 2.
Yeah, part 2, exactly.
Thank you for joining us for this conversation today. If you liked what you heard, be sure to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify to help more people discover the show. Really appreciate you joining us today. And be sure to hit subscribe, leave a comment, and come back next week so we can keep exploring what's up next in tech and shape our collective future together. Until then, stay curious.